Are we live? Hello and welcome to the Scottish Green Party online hustings for our co-leader position. My name is Chaz Booth. I am the Green Councillor for Leith on the City of Edinburgh Council, and I am chairing tonight's first ever hustings. The co-leader, of course, is a new position in our party constitution. There are two to be elected, and at least one must be a woman. The role of the co-leader, they are responsible for the public perception of the Scottish Green Party. They are the chief spokespeople of our party, and they provide political leadership to the Scottish Green Party. The format of tonight's hustings is that a moment ago we chose a random order for the candidates to give us their 2-minute statements. So we will start with those. We will then have questions which have been submitted by party members, both online and by social media and by email. And we'll have an opportunity for each of the candidates to answer those questions. We then have an opportunity for each candidate to put a question to the other candidates. And finally, we will have closing statements of 1 minute each. Now, of course, I can't ask the candidates to do their introductory statements until I've introduced them. So first of all, in Aberdeen, we have Maggie Chapman and Guy Ingerson. Would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
And here in Edinburgh, we are joined by Lorna Slater, Patrick Harvey, and Graham Kerr. Would you like to say hello?
Hello.
So, as I mentioned, the order for opening statements was drawn at random out of a hat a few minutes ago, and the first name out of the hat was Maggie Chapman. So, Maggie, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chaz. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for watching this online hustings. And a huge thanks to everyone who's been involved in putting tonight together. I'm Maggie Chapman, and I'm asking for your #1 preference vote in the first ever co-leader hustings for the Scottish Greens. We have just 11 years to tackle climate breakdown, the biggest existential threat we have ever faced. And we know that we Greens have the radical ideas and policies to help us tackle this crisis. Ideas like the Green New Deal, Just Transition, and a whole suite of others. But we need to be much bolder with positive messages reaching out to new people. I have experience in doing just this. When a councillor, I was the first politician to call for the payment of a living wage, and I championed participatory budgeting. Now, neither of those ideas seem that radical, but at the time, they were. And we also know that in our 2014 European elections, we were the only parliamentary party to put a positive case for immigration as our frontline policy in an election campaign. And I was proud to have achieved that as lead candidate. Once we have our bold, positive messages, we need to use them to enthuse our members. We need to use them to garner new supporters and those who already have a lot of goodwill for us as Greens. But we need to turn that goodwill into votes. And whilst we're doing that, we need to make sure we have the right support for our members so that they can campaign across the country in ways that suit them. And importantly, we need to work very hard with communities and social movements to increase the reach, appeal, and success of our party. We saw how effective that was with Green Yes during the independence referendum. And that is why I was so keen to ensure we got support for Extinction Rebellion as well as the climate strikers. So I have the vision, experience, and skills to lead the Scottish Green Party. And that is why I'm asking for your #1 preference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie, and thank you for doing a good job there of keeping to time as well. I would remind those who are watching online that you can also join in the debate on Twitter using hashtag SGPLeader2019. So please do join that debate. So on to the second 2-minute opening statement, and that comes from Guy Ingerson. Over to you, Guy.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. For me, the style of leadership is really important to get the kind of message out that we really want to put across. But we also need to look at our core values. So, for example, environmental protection, social justice, radical democracy, local democracy, and non-violent action. I think on occasions we have strayed from at least one of these, which is radical democracy, and I really want to put that at the heart of my campaign. But I also want to look at the leadership in itself. We need a true partnership, so co-leaders working together. One of the strengths of Greens is that job sharing aspect to our role. And I think we really need to make sure that whoever is elected, we utilise each of those strengths and really champion each other. But also we need to work with our national committees to really push our message out. We need to be canvassing, we need a street campaign, and we also need a campaigning style of leadership. And that's the kind of leadership I would like to bring. We've seen where this has been successful. So in the English Greens, we've seen Jonathan Bartley really out there campaigning. He didn't have to be an MSP or even a councillor to do that. And he really supported branches to turn members into activists and activists into local leaders. And that's exactly what I would like to do. But we also need to really value our members. I would like to introduce a Leaders Award so that we champion our organisers, our data whiz kids, and our candidates to really make sure that they all feel valued. I would also really like to broaden our base by talking about things that we don't normally talk about. I have experience doing this in Aberdeen. So for example, I spoke about the Kingsford Stadium development. That really hit with working class voters, and really people were shocked and slightly surprised, but they were thrilled to actually hear us speaking about an issue that isn't necessarily associated with Greens. And we need to really keep doing that. So that is the kind of leadership I would bring, and that is why I'm looking for people's first preference vote.
Guy, thank you very much indeed. And that was actually under time. So as chair, I'm delighted. Please, other candidates take note. The next name out of the hat was Patrick Harvey. So Patrick, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chaz. Good evening, everybody. I've been privileged to be part of the parliamentary group as well as co-convener of the party's National Council in recent years. And since I became an MSP, I've had the opportunity to help broaden the perception of what the Greens are about. From my early years getting involved in issues like civil liberties and equalities, through the difficult times when we only had 2 MSPs, trying to maximise that influence, maximise that voice, that was really tough. In 2016, we set out to capitalise on the extra profile and platform that the party had gained through the independence referendum. And we did that. We trebled our number of seats. And since then, we've been trying to make good on that promise that we made. We said that a better Scotland needs a bolder Holyrood. I've been leading the party's work on the influence that we can bring to bear on the Scottish budget. And as a result of that, we've got a completely new income tax system in Scotland. Fairer, raising more revenue, but protecting lower earners and closing the inequality gap. We can do so much more on that in the coming years. The increased wave of new energy and creativity around the climate movement, both the school strikes and Extinction Rebellion, is something we need to be working with and learning from. And as we approach the 2021 election, it's important that we get the maximum number of voices from our party out there being heard. But it's also important that our parliamentary group remains part of the leadership team within the party. We're going to have to make sure that people across Scotland recognise that Greens have what it takes, not just to run campaigns, but to enter government at some point in Scotland as well. I think the Scottish Greens parliamentary group is making a good effort to turn that vision into a reality. I want to continue to do that work as the Scottish Green Party's co-leader. So I hope you'll give me your first preference vote.
Patrick, thank you very much indeed. So we are 3 candidates down. We are 2 to go. And the next candidate to give us their 2-minute introductory statement is Lorna Slater. Lorna.
Thank you, Chaz. 3 years ago, I headed up the campaign team that got Alison Johnson re-elected and Andy Whiteman elected to the Scottish Parliament. I still mount this amongst my greatest achievements in life. What a thing to achieve, 2 MSPs in Lothian. 2 years ago, I started convening the operations committee for the Scottish Green Party. And that year I also convened the communications working group, where we looked at how we deal with external communications in the party. Last year, I convened the structural working group, which is a working group created by our party's council to carry on the work initiated by SOC to implement a new party structure. These changes were implemented this year at Spring Conference. My new mission is to get the Women's Network up and running. I organized an AGM at conference this year, and I'm in the middle of working with party staff to get IT issues resolved here. I have identified a need, and I've started to put in place actions to solve it. This is an urgent issue for the party. We've got Holyrood selections happening next month, We need a slate of women candidates, and we need support teams for those women to campaign for them, help them through the campaign, and to fundraise for them. I'm pretty unstoppable when I'm on a mission, so I'm confident that I can get this done. I would really like your first preference vote as co-leader so that I can use the visibility of that platform to raise that of women and other underrepresented minorities. For example, I commit to sharing my speaking slot at conference every year with another woman to help them build their visibility within the party. I pledge to make regular videos or podcasts about what the party is up to, again, to bring visibility to up-and-coming members, but also to engage our members and the public in what the Green Party are doing. I said when I opened conference this year that I was excited about the future of the Scottish Green Party. And this hustings and the active participation in this internal election shows that things can change. This is just the start of an exciting new future for the Scottish Greens. Please give me your first preference vote.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Lorna, which leaves us with only one candidate still to give us their opening statement. And therefore, without further ado, over to you, Graham.
Hi there. My name is Graham Kerr. I'm from the North Lanarkshire branch, and I'm asking for your vote to be the co-leader of the party. In my working life, I'm an environmental regulator with SEPA and work to improve the environment and prevent people causing damage to our communities. It's one of my big passions, and I have to work with a cross-section of people, from those who care really deeply to those who don't care at all. And I believe our communities and environment are important, and that's why I joined the Greens. I want to make sure that environmental issues and social justice are priorities in our political discourse. I believe our policies are the best for the whole country. It's prepared me for campaigning in North Lanarkshire, as like many areas in Scotland at the moment, it's hard to get people to consider voting Green, and we don't have an MSP or even a councillor that represents our area, so it can feel a lot like a lot of tough work with little reward. In the words of Kermit the Frog, sometimes it's not easy being Green. However, I believe it's really important to be a party of the whole country, as people all over Scotland will benefit from a stronger Green presence in all levels of government and society. Our country's politicians need to have the compassion to deal with issues of poverty and inequality, and we need to win people outside our current supporters who can be disillusioned with politics as a whole or caught up in the empty promises of other parties. The SNP declare a climate emergency and yet still want more road building, more oil extraction, and even wanted tax cuts for air travel. We've seen developments that destroy our irreplaceable habitats so that a rich American can build a golf course. But we have biting poverty, and our houses are inadequate in areas, and people are struggling to feed their families, access amenities, or see any hope for a future. Austerity has really bitten hard, but those at the bottom have been hit hardest. We need to demand a fairer Scotland and hold the SNP's feet to the fire when they team up with the Tories to block progress on land reform, transport, and improving our communities. So that's why I'm asking for your first preference vote, so we can be the party that Scotland needs us to be.
Thank you very much indeed. And can I say, from a timekeeping perspective, all of the candidates were excellent there. There was hardly a cigarette paper between them. So that's fantastic from the point of view of me as chair. So that was the introductory statements from each of our 5 candidates. Thank you very much to all of them. We now move on to questions which have been submitted by party members in advance. And the first question comes from Michelle, and it is as follows. A good leader needs a coherent political philosophy. Can you please describe yours and give an example of how you've put it into practice? And that question, first of all, goes to Guy in Aberdeen.
Well, I'm an eco-socialist, which probably isn't a surprise to most people, but I also believe in democratic confederalism. And a prime example of where I've implemented that is within my own branch. So we abolished ordinary members because we need to, well, not literally abolish them, but we abolished the post of ordinary members because we kind of felt like such a small branch as ours, we need everyone having a specific role. So we introduced the idea of area reps. So the area reps are eventually going to build up sub-branches. So that means such a wide area as Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, which is a huge area. Actually, every area has buy-in and feed-in to the decisions that we make at a more central level within the city. So that's my political philosophy. I believe in decentralization. I believe in this socialism, in providing for communities, in really making sure that the commons works for everyone. But I also believe that the eco side of that, without our support systems, none of that is ever going to work. So we need to protect our environment.
Okay, Guy, thank you very much. That's time up for you, but just within time. Well done. That question, do you want me to repeat the question, or are you happy? You guys happy? Okay, next question goes to, the same question, sorry, goes to Patrick.
I think the core of green politics has to be about a recognition of the limits that the world sets down for us, the opportunity to build a better, fairer, healthier society and economy that respects those limits. If we continue to live as we are, ignoring those limits that the world sets down, we will not only destroy the environment and the living world around us, but will make people's lives worse. I think empowering people, giving people not just the information about those challenges and those changes that are necessary, but the power to put them into practice is really critical. My favourite example of what the Greens have put into practice there is the Climate Challenge Fund, because around that time there was a lot of talk about climate change, just as a kind of issue where people would wag their fingers and tell you this is how you have to live your life. The Climate Challenge Fund was about giving people the ability to try something new, try something experimental, learn from failure sometimes, but learn from their successes as well. And it was such a success that the government continued to keep that Climate Challenge Fund going for years, well after they needed our votes in the Parliament to keep it going. So I'm happy with that one.
Okay, thanks very much, Patrick. And the same question goes to Lorna.
Thank you. My political philosophy is that people are more important than ideas. And I think how that relates to party co-leader is in the relationships that role requires the person to build. Relationships with communities, to be visible and known, a figure that people can contact, ask questions of. Visible to party members. And how I put that into practice, I've been visiting branches to do talks and training sessions. I've been visible to members and supporting members by offering skills training sessions and by running welcome sessions for new members to the party. In terms of being visible to the community and building relationships in the community, I really enjoy knocking on doors. It's actually canvassing, speaking to people in my street, in my neighborhood about what's important to them. It all has to start from people with me, and that's where it will be.
Thanks very much indeed, Lorna. And the next candidate to answer that question is Graham.
So I think for me, my philosophy is really about compassion for people. I think that we often kind of forget, or people forget that because we care about animals and we care about the environment, we also care about people, we also care about poverty, we also care about inequality. And that those all stem from our compassion for a fairer society. I think that I've been out canvassing or knocking on doors or kind of doing stalls and listening to people and their real experiences really does shape you when you're trying to kind of work out how a policy would affect people. I think we need to have listening ears to hear the kind of people on the streets who are really not doing well out of austerity, and then shape our policies to kind of fix that. So I think that that's where I would say that I would act as a co-leader.
Thanks very much indeed, Graham. And finally, we go back up to Aberdeen to Maggie.
Thank you, Chaz. Thanks for the question. I believe that people are profoundly cooperative, collaborative, and creative beings. And I think the role of politics is to enable and create the context in which those things can thrive. I want our politics to free people from need. It should be providing the basics like food and shelter as a given, but it should also be providing the opportunity for wonder. The competitive economic structures we have and coercive approach of the state often leads to alienation of our people. If green politics is about an important thing, it's prioritizing the freedom from this economic and political coercion and competition. I've worked on the living wage, on participatory budgeting, on stopping bullying in local authorities. I've made the case for a Green New Deal. I've wanted Scotland to be a world leader in peace building. So radical decentralization of power is central to this. Transformative ideas like universal basic income, free public transport, I've supported these long before they were popular. Indeed, it's been green advocacy that's made these ideas popular, and that's the kind of leadership I want to bring to this contest.
Maggie, thank you very much indeed. Before we go on to the next question, can I just say somebody has commented on Twitter to say there is an unequal sound volume between Aberdeen and Edinburgh. We are trying to resolve that, but it's tricky. But I am told by my technical advisors that we will try and get a subtitled version up as soon as possible. and somebody will respond directly to that message on Twitter as soon as we can get it. So that leads me on to the next question from a party member, which is from Tom. As co-leader, how would you reach out to the wider electorate? That question, first of all, goes to Lorna.
So I think that visibility is absolutely the key. We need to be visible in the communities around Scotland, and the way that we are visible is through the activities of our members. So this will be where I start, by engaging members, by getting out to branches where I can join in canvassing, setting a good example, helping people feel more confident with this, and listening to voters and communities as well. I would like to make regular videos and podcasts about what's happening in the party. For example, after conference and after each council meeting, what was decided, who has an agenda, who's standing for a post, what's getting done. Because the more engaged our members are, the more encouraged they will be to go out, and the more excited to go out and share our messages. When I do get a chance to be in the media as co-leader, I will try to be memorable. Sometimes this might mean a bit controversial, but I'm up for it.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Lorna. And that question now goes to Maggie in Aberdeen.
I think, as I said in my opening remarks, the key to being to reaching the audiences, to building relationships with people, is having the radical and positive messages that we know we can have if we put our minds to it. Having those messages, though, is not all there is. We have to be building links beyond our supporter base and beyond our already supportive audience. But we know there's a lot of goodwill for green policies and green ideas out there, and the trick is to convert that goodwill into votes. One really important way of doing that is to build very, very strong links with social movements. We are the party of social movements. We've seen that with independence. We know we can do that on the climate crisis. So movements like Extinction Rebellion and Climate Strikers are important. But more than that, we've worked as a party with movements like the Living Rent campaign. And I think it's those kinds of ideas that matter to people, to their everyday lives. We need to be speaking to people about what matters to them in exciting ways.
Thanks very much indeed, Maggie, for your answer to that question. And next we go to Graham.
So I think to reach out to the wider electorate, we really need to put some clear green water between us and the SNP. If I had £1 for every person who said, well, it's just effectively the same as voting for the SNP, I'd be a rich man. And it's not. The SNP are radically almost right-wing when it comes to economic, and well, also they want to extract as much oil out of the ground as they possibly can. So there's loads of differences between us and them, and I think that we need to dispel the rumour that we are only just the other party of independence out there. We have some radically different opinions from the other parties. And I think that when we do that, we've seen huge successes and huge disappointments when people who would have thought, well, who can be against 20-mile-an-hour speed limit as a default happens. There's loads of times where we need to say, we are not them, we are us.
Thanks very much indeed, Graham. A strong message to end on there. And that question now goes to Patrick.
Yeah, I think this is something we've been doing well already at the top of the party in building, for example, good relationships with the trade union movement, with many parts of the voluntary sector, with equalities campaigns. I think the place that it's missing very often is at the local level. We need to be honest with ourselves that we haven't developed the kind of campaigning capacity and campaigning culture in every part of the country that we have in some. And many of our branches still need more support to develop that kind of activist culture that gets them out on the doorsteps, gets them out from behind those pacing tables and start knocking on doors and talking to people. We know what works. It's not rocket science. Green parties and other political parties have been learning how to do this for many, many years. And we know that where Greens are active, getting out in the local communities, it really does make the difference and build a relationship with far more voters. We can do that, but we need to support many more of our branches to develop that kind of culture.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Patrick. And the final candidate who hasn't yet answered that question is Guy in Aberdeen.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things is we need to get out of our comfort zone. I think one of the things that I heard after the European elections was, well, we were pleased by the SNP on one side and we were pleased by the Lib Dems on the other. One of the things that I said to the member who told me that is, don't you dare say that to me ever again, because actually that is a comfort blanket for what the result was. And what we really need to be saying is exactly what some of the other candidates have been saying. We need to build a campaign culture. One of the reasons why we didn't do as well as we could have in the European elections is that we weren't active across the country. The constituency was Scotland. And I think it was really, really important that we actually had campaign teams out across the country. And that's something that we didn't do. And one of the things that I would do as co-leader is try and build members from activists, from members to activists, and activists to local leaders. Because one of the things that we've been doing really well in Aberdeen is actually getting our message out there, even though we don't have councillors. I mean, I have made sure that I have been speaking about the issues that are important to the people of Aberdeen, and I think that's really, really important, whether it's Kingsford, Glendow Wind Farm, or the thing that I was most well known for, campaigning against the incinerator in Torry. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to be speaking about and relating it to people's daily lives.
Guy, thanks very much indeed for that. And so we go on to the next question. Can I just say, in terms of questions, the vast majority of these have been submitted by members beforehand. If we have enough time, I will try and squeeze in one question from Twitter using the hashtag SGP, what was it again? SGP Leader 2019. You can tell I've prepared for this. So that brings us on to the next question that's been submitted by members beforehand, which comes from Cass. The question is, what does a Green New Deal mean to you? And that question, first of all, goes to Graham.
Well, I think a Green New Deal means an opportunity to tag on to a global movement for something that is trying to be radical, trying to be positive, and saying that we cannot just continue as we are. We actually have to completely change the framework. We've been living in a car culture for 60 years. We've been living in an industry and a growth culture for hundreds of years. We need to change the record. And I think that we need to look at not just environmental policies, but the environmental impact of all policies, looking at equality issues, looking at fairness issues, looking at social justice issues to make sure that the decisions that we make are not based on GDP, but are made on what actually the people of Scotland need.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Graham. Same question to you, Lorna.
A Green New Deal means three things to me. One, the first thing is a massive commitment to redistribution of wealth, starting with a crackdown on tax havens in cooperation with the EU, land value tax, and ending subsidies to oil and gas interests, motoring, and air traffic. With all the money saved from this can be redirected to subsidize public transport, ensure social care standards, upgrade housing stock and house building, a warm home for everyone. These activities would create jobs, and the underpinning all of this would be a universal basic income so that nobody has to fear destitution. The third aspect is a renewables revolution, fair transition to wind, solar, and tidal energy, a proliferation of community energy schemes, an economy which has got jobs, quality of life, and good health for everyone.
Thanks very much indeed, Lorna. And let's go up to Aberdeen for our next candidate and go to you, Guy.
Well, a Green New Deal is actually something that's extremely close to my heart. I was in the fossil fuel industry for nearly 10 years, working in procurement and material logistics. And one of the reasons I joined this party and the Green movement is because of the oil price crash back in 2015. So I've seen exactly the devastating effects, not only to our environment, but to our communities as well. And I think I'll be able to bring that experience and communicate why Green New Deal is so important if people give me their first preference as co-leader. We need to be looking at jobs not only in renewable energies, but everything from waste recycling, but not just recycling, but a circular economy. We need to be looking at transport in particular, which is a big thing. And I think it was really quite annoying that we didn't champion our fare free public transport policy when it came out of conference. We should have done that. That let Labour get the little bit of a lead on us when they put the press out for us. So I think really a Green New Deal is a holistic thing, but we also need to be looking at rural areas, looking at sustainable agriculture. Agriculture, transport, and housing are the three areas we're not doing well on in terms of our reducing our emissions. So those are the three things that I would really focus on, as well as looking at communities like my own in the Northeast.
Thanks very much indeed, Guy. And sorry, I didn't give you your 10-second warning there. I was concentrating on the Twitter feed to try and find another question to slip in. but we're still on that question about the Green New Deal. Let's stay in Aberdeen and go to Maggie.
Thanks very much for this question. For me, it's very important to recognise that the Green New Deal starts with need. We want to implement it because we need to. We absolutely have to do this, not because it's good for our economy or it brings in tax revenue. We have to do this. We've been talking about it for over 10 years. And for me, it's about a very clear public-led investment in creating the social and environmental infrastructure that will deal with the climate emergency we face. At the same time, creating lots of high quality, well-paid jobs. We've also called it a just transition, and we've led the agenda on this. The SNP have created their Just Transition Commission because of our pressure on this issue, despite their allegiances with oil and gas. So we need to grow our renewables. We need to ensure that we maximize energy storage, insulation, efficiency and retrofitting, all of these things, creating new jobs to transform our economy and helping us achieve the zero emissions we need to lead the world. And also, whilst we do this, freeing up time so that we as humans can do the things that we are good at, care for each other, cooperate with each other and be creative.
Maggie, thanks very much indeed, which brings us to our final candidate for this question, and that's Patrick.
Yeah, as others have said, the Green New Deal as a concept is not just one thing. It's somebody said used the word holistic. It is a very broad idea. It's partly about saying that climate change and the transformation that's needed in the world to respond to the climate emergency doesn't have to be something about giving up all prospects of prosperity. It's about redefining prosperity. It's about creating that prosperity in a different way. It's also an invitation to the world to think differently about the economy. Climate change or no climate change, the free market deregulated economic model has been failing us for far too long. And that's why in 2007-8, that's round about when the New Economics Foundation and others, including Karen Lucas, came up with the idea of Green New Deal. It's still being worked on, and we're working with the New Economics Foundation at the moment to put that idea into practice for Scotland. We should be unafraid of the big issues which only a reserve government can deal with, but we also need to start defining for Scotland how the devolved government can put Green New Deal ideas into practice.
Great, thanks very much indeed, Patrick. So that takes us on to our question number 4 from party members, and that goes as follows. It's from Alistair. The question is, with the incoming climate crisis, we can't afford to stall at the next election. What is your strategy to bring the green wave to Scotland in 2021? And that question, first of all, goes to Patrick.
Yeah, I think the 2021 election is going to be very different than the European election that we've just seen. Partly because the Brexit scenario will have moved on, but partly because it will be a judgment on the SNP's record in government, which the European election was not. And I think a great many SNP supporters are now seeing where their party is failing, where the party they've backed has not done what they expected of it. From issues like subsidising fossil fuels and the arms industry, through to things which affect perhaps smaller proportions of people, like the hill tracks issue that Andy Whiteman was working on, regulation of short-term letting. We now have a very long list of issues, from animal welfare through to climate crisis issues, where the SNP have not followed through on what I think a lot of their own members and supporters have been expecting of them. That, I think, is where our opportunity in 2021 is going to be, saying the Greens are the party that are going to put these ideas into practice, because the SNP have not.
Okay, thanks very much, Patrick. So, Graham, Green New Wave, how will you bring it to Scotland?
I think that they need to show that there is hope in a vote for the Greens. I think that we have a lot of kind of negativity, obviously, at the moment around Brexit, around parties not maybe doing what they have promised. I think that we can show a track record where the Greens have actually done more than they have promised to do, even though we're perhaps not in the position where we have the power that the other parties do, or the number of seats that other parties do, or the influence at the tables that other parties do. I think we really need to engage voters in a positive vote for the Green Party, and take the kind of the climate kind of strikers that the schools, the Extinction Rebellion. There is a real desire to see something different happen, and in England, you can either choose the Brexit Party or Lib Dems, but in Scotland, we have a strong Green Party here that can really make a change So I think that's how we do it. We engage with people to try and say, this is a message of hope for both being.
Graham, thanks very much indeed for that. Let's go up to Aberdeen for our next answer and go to Maggie.
Thanks for this question. I think for me, the most important thing is the big ideas that we know we've got. We need to have our big, positive, radical ideas front.
Start your answer again. We'll give you some extra time.
Okay, no problem. The wonders of technology. Thanks, Chaz. So I think for me, our 2021 campaign and the work we do in the lead up to that and beyond has to be about big ideas, the big, positive, radical ideas that we know we've got. We need to make sure we put these front and center of our campaign to make sure that those are the ideas that will win us seats. We need to move well beyond Parliament as well. We are, as I've said, the party of social movements. We need to make sure we have 1 foot in our parliaments and in our councils and 1 foot on our streets. We need to, as others have already said, ensure that part of that connection with social movements and our communities is that campaigning culture, because we need to turn what is already goodwill for the Greens out there into votes. And we will only do that by giving people hope because of our radical ideas.
Maggie, thank you very much indeed. And for our next answer, let's stay in Aberdeen and go to Guy.
So 2021 is going to be a huge election for us. And I think we need to factor in the fact that the SNP and the Tories are going to go on either saying no to independence and yes to independence. And we need to have a distinct message that cuts through that. I think we can learn lessons from our European partners. So looking at the Bavarian Greens, they carved out a distinct green message about identity. You know, there was a survey carried out that showed that one of the things that people most identify as being Scottish with is the landscape. And this is something we're extremely strong on. This is something that Andy Whiteman in particular has been championing, but also Mark Ruthville in looking at, kelp, for example. Something that a lot of people in cities wouldn't have been animated about, but it really struck a chord with a lot of people across Scotland. I think that's the kind of message we need to be going into 2021 with. We are not only here to protect people and our planet, but we're here to protect the Scottish identity and the Scottish landscape from corporations, the likes of Boris Johnson, maybe Jeremy Hunt if he's lucky enough. We really need to make sure that that's the message that we cut through with, as well as looking at the bold ideas and holding the SNP to account. As co-leader, I'll be working with our MSPs. They won't be cast adrift because I'm not an MSP. I will be working with them to make sure that our message about holding the government account really kicks through.
Thank you very much indeed, Guy. And finally, our last candidate to answer that question, Lorna.
So in terms of winning more seats in Holyrood in 2021, my recipe is, as I said before, that people are more important than ideas. And I've already started work on this. I chaired a meeting last week with the Women's Network where we put together ideas for a campaign which will be running next month to encourage more women to stand, to say, let's get up and do this together, to get some women supporting one another so that candidates don't feel alone. We're going to have at least 5 women in winnable positions in this next Holyrood election. Hopefully several more as well. We've got to find those women. We have to coach them and support them, fundraise for them, and do all those practical things. And as I say, I've already started doing this. So that's my aim. We get fantastic women candidates, we get them the resources and support that they need, and we bring them visibility. As co-leader, I want to share my platform with them so that the people of Scotland can get to know our excellent women candidates. And this is how we're going to win more seats in Holyrood in 2021.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Lorna. So that was the end of question 4 that's been pre-submitted by our members beforehand. I am really keen, if we can, to try and fit in a 6th question from social media. But before I do that, let's go to another question that's been submitted by party members beforehand. And that comes from Mark, and it is as follows. With so much going on at the moment on Brexit, the environment, and so much more besides, what will be your first policy priority on day one in the new job? The very first issue you will look at. And can I invite Maggie to answer that question first of all, please?
That's a good question. I think, as is important, one of the roles of co-leaders is to provide political leadership for the party. I think one of the things we really, really need to do is ensure that we have a comprehensive set of policies that tackle the urgent need for wealth redistribution. We know what we've already got with the Green New Deal. We know what we've already got with our taxation policies. But I think there's something interesting in inheritance tax and taxing wealth. You know, a lot of the taxes we have are focused on income. We need to shift that to where wealth actually resides, if we are to have genuine redistribution of wealth, a genuine attempt or achieve a genuine transformation of our economy, because we know that at the moment the capitalist economy we've got is destroying people's lives, it's destroying our planet, and we need to change that. And tackling inequality, wealth inequality, is one of the key things in that.
Thanks very much indeed, Maggie. Let's stay in Aberdeen and go to Guy.
Well, I think for me, the Green New Deal is the big policy priority. So that actually encompasses a wealth of policies. So I'm kind of cheating a little bit here. So, you know, public transport, reducing poverty. I mean, I'm thinking particularly of something as simple as, you know, insulation in housing. You know, it's a huge issue for people, fuel poverty. So I think stuff like that is really where we need to be aiming for. But also because I live in the Northeast and I was in the fossil fuel industry, I think I've actually seen the importance of the Green New Deal far more than almost anybody else, really. I also suffered the effects of the oil price crash. So for me, it's really about championing the Green New Deal. That would be my priority. And that also encompasses other things. So independence. One of the things that will allow us to really put the Green New Deal forward is by being an independent country. So the combination of all of those really merges in together as part of the Green New Deal. And that tackling poverty, environmental protection, as well as subsidiarity and democracy, I think that combination all comes under the banner of the Green New Deal. So that would be my policy priority.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Guy. So let's hear from Patrick here in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I think, you know, this inevitably is a question that all of us will start talking about some of the stuff that's already come up, like Green New Deal, like taxation, like inequality. Rather than picking just one issue, because those issues and independence and Brexit will all be on the agenda. I think the thing that we have to crack is giving people the idea that green politics is about hope, that green politics isn't about, you know, hair shirt kind of self-denial and a kind of paucity of vision for the future. Green politics is about being hopeful. Whether that's hopeful that an independent Scotland can be a better place to live, whether it's hopeful that a Green New Deal means responding to the climate emergency can improve people's quality of life, whether it's hopeful about ending that chronic inequality that we see around us. All of those issues we need to engage with in a way that inspires people to believe in hope. And at the moment, hope is really, really hard work when you look out in the world and see some of the challenges that we all face. But I think that's the one thing that we have to embody more than anything else.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Patrick. So let's go to Lorna for that question.
However much I wish things were different, I think we have to swim in the water that we find ourselves in. And the urgent issue for Scotland at the moment is staying in the EU. That's what's happening to us. In October, we'll be taken out of the EU against our will, unless there's some last minute ability to revoke Article 50 or some other drastic action happens. We need to be focused on very urgently saving our place in the EU, whether that is by working with other Remain parties UK-wide, or whether that is by prioritizing independence. We have to take those pieces as they come. For me, I think independence is the way forward, that we should be campaigning for that first and foremost as a way to primarily to stay in the EU. It's just so urgent. October 31st, no deal Brexit is a terrifying thing. On that day, medicines would be stopped, food deliveries will be shortage. We have to deal with this urgent matter that's before us and come up with plans for managing this in Scotland and for finding our way out of this awful situation. I absolutely wish these were not the waters we're swimming in, but they are, and we need a plan for it.
Lorna, thanks very much indeed. And our last question, last candidate for this question is Graham.
Yeah, I think my first policy priority would be to rail against the austerity that is biting so many people in Scotland. I think that we have so many people who their lives are already so desperate and their circumstances are already so difficult that they're you know, even Brexit happening will not make it any worse than it already is. We need to be reaching out to the communities where they have been devastated by policies that have been passed down from the Tories, and absolutely, you know, the SNP have been dealt a kind of budget cut there, but they have chosen to allow a situation to exist where we have food banks in Scotland, where we have people who don't have enough money to eat and to heat their houses. This is what we need to be standing up against. The gross injustice of austerity is something that we need to be overturning, and that would be what I would do on day one as co-leader.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Graham. And because our candidates have stuck so well to time, and I'm now getting death stares from the technical people in the room, I'm going to take one question from Twitter. And this comes from Susan in Edinburgh. Greens are perceived as very middle class, even though working class councillors do exist. Sure. Albeit as a minority. How would you change that perception? First of all, can we go to Aberdeen and Guy, please?
Well, I am working class, so there we go. That's at least one working class person. I'm sure some of you, the rest of you are as well. I don't know everyone's backgrounds, but one of the things that I found really difficult when I first went into the party was the language used at branch meetings. So, you know, hearing people quoting Angela Davis and stuff like that when I was, you know, shelf stacking in a local supermarket. So that's the kind of stuff that I would like to change, you know, to have more inclusive language in the party. But I also think, you know, to answer Susan, I think we all know who Susan is, but I think we should also champion our working class councillors and our working class voices within the party. And if you give me your first preference and elect me as co-leader, that in and of itself is a message showing that green politics is for everyone. Scottish politics is for everyone. But, you know, it's not just middle class voices, but it's voices for everybody. And I think we really need to increase our representation of our minority groups as well. All of us are very, very white. Me in particular, because I haven't caught the sun. So we need to change that.
So Guy's message is more sun for all of us. Thank you very much, Guy. I was paraphrasing, obviously. Let's hear from Patrick on that question.
Yeah, I think this comes back to where a lot of us were talking earlier about the need to reinvigorate and re-energize local campaigning. We know that Greens can get elected in, you know, well outside of what you might call the organic couscous belt in well-to-do parts of society or trendy areas. You know, in Glasgow, for example, Denniston, Govan, years before that, Southside Central. We are capable of getting not just councillors elected, but running really invigorating campaigns about local issues where we get out there. But we're not doing that all across the country. There are many parts of the country where we haven't been supporting our branches well enough to develop that kind of campaigning culture. And I really come back to this point that it's only by doing that, by developing a campaigning culture, by getting out from behind the pasting table, knocking on doors, being active in local communities. That's how we build that relationship, broaden the perception of who we are, and actually bring more people in to feel welcome as Green members and activists.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Patrick. So just a reminder to everybody that the debate will continue on Twitter using hashtag SGPLeader2019. We've got a couple more candidates to answer this question. We're going to go next to Lorna.
There was some great data that someone shared on Twitter last week or the week before that showed that Green Party membership actually has a lower than average national wage. They're more likely to be women. So while there may be a perception that the Green Party is overwhelmingly middle class, that isn't actually factually correct. We are actually one of the more representative political parties in that respect, which I thought was very interesting. We do have, as Guy points out, several working class councillors, several of them women. And as I've said before, as co-leader, I would share my platform with our up and coming stars. And that includes several of our councillors. You mentioned our councillor in Denniston. We've got councillors in City Centre, Leith Walk, Edinburgh, who I know I would love to share that platform with and help them with their visibility. In general, I want to increase participation, particularly of women and add all types of diversity, including BME candidates, disabled candidates, and non-binary candidates. We are definitely wanting to increase the number of people that are involved in the Scottish Green Party, and the diversity needs to come with that too. So I'm absolutely committed to that.
Lorna, thank you very much indeed. Let's stay in Edinburgh and hear from Graham.
No, I think the middle class thing is a very easy thing to throw at Greens, but I think it's not true. And I think that our policies actually are some of the kind of most open and fair, and trying to bring equality to all social classes. I think that sometimes we're maybe not so good at communicating that, but I think that our compassion for all is probably sometimes not enjoyed by the media. It's much easier to have us as a bunch of lentil munching kind of people who care about the really, really obscure things. We do care about these things, but we care because we care about people, we care about our communities, and we care about our country, and we care about what's happening to it. So I think that we sometimes are just a little bit poor at communicating that, but we have lots of good success stories. We just need to communicate that more.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Graham. And for the final candidate to answer this question, let's go back up to Aberdeen and hear from Maggie.
Thanks very much, Chaz, and thank you to Susan for this question. I was absolutely delighted when Susan succeeded me as councillor for Leith Walk in Edinburgh. Really, really pleased for her and for us as a party. In some ways, what Graham says about this is absolutely key. This is what we talk about. We need to be talking about housing. We need to be talking about precarious employment and 0 hours contracts and being able to put food on people's tables. We need to be talking about the things that matter to people in their everyday lives. I've been arguing, as long as I've been in the party, for very, very clear and concerted effort and more work in working class areas. And we know it's paid off. We have a councillor for Craigmillar in Edinburgh, one of the poorest communities in Scotland, because of the work that we've been doing in this. So it's about talking about things that are relevant to people, as well as doing the things that are important to them, like as we did in Edinburgh, opposing privatisation of public services, making our relevance, highlighting just how relevant we are across the board on so many issues.
Maggie, thanks very much indeed. So that brings us to the end of our questions from members. Now we get an opportunity for each of the candidates to put a question to the other candidates. And our first questioner is going to be in Aberdeen, and that is Guy. Would you like to ask your question, please, Guy?
Yes, so my question is, how would you reform fishing in a post-Brexit Scotland?
How would you reform fishing in a post-Brexit Scotland? First of all, let's go to Lorna.
So let's assume that we have the powers to do that and they haven't been repatriated by Westminster. I don't think that's an assumption we can necessarily hold on to. Goodness, wouldn't that be great? So first we win independence and now we have all the powers. But I was very lucky this year. I traveled to the Antarctic with Christiana Figueres, who used to lead the UN Committee on Climate Change. And Christiana Figueres says it isn't policy if it isn't science. So the way you reform fishing policy is by listening to the scientists. We have to follow their guidance on what really is a sustainable catch and not just wishful thinking of people who just want to make money from this resource. That's where I would start.
Lorna, thanks very much indeed. So let's hear from Graham. Post-Brexit fishing.
Well, I think, fishing is often seen as just the boats going out, but actually the cage fish farming is a hugely polluting industry that is maybe not getting the profile because it's seen as a clean, and it's using the kind of environment of Scotland as a way of selling that product. But we need to be making sure that it's sustainable. We need to be making sure that our fish stocks are protected, because we don't want fishermen to lose their jobs. And I think the thing is that also who controls the fishing rights is something that we need to look at to make sure that we're distributing them fairly across the country, and that we're not giving one big company or two big companies such a huge control over the entire industry. So that's what I would do.
Graham, thanks very much indeed. I once heard somebody say that fishing would all be great if fish just respected some borders. But Patrick, how would you deal with this problem?
I think the first thing is to make sure the Scottish Government stops inviting the fishing interests in to start writing government policy, just as they do with getting the NFU in to write agricultural policy. There's a real problem of vested interest capturing policy at the moment in Scotland on this. We do need to listen to the science, but we also need to decentralise ownership. There's a very small number of families who control a vast swathe of the fishing industry in Scotland, and that's no good for the small independent businesses that are trying to make a living. The communities that have their roots in that industry are not going to thrive just as much as the fish stocks themselves are not going to thrive. So it's about changing the ownership and staying within the science and not allowing vested interests to write government policy.
Patrick, thank you. Let's go back up to Aberdeen for the next answer from Maggie.
Thanks very much, Chaz. Thanks for that question, Guy. I think it's really important to think about two things in this initially. Firstly, the fishing industry in Scotland is not homogenous. We need to think about the approaches that we take to the fleet, and we need to think about the approaches we take for processing. We also need to understand that it doesn't work the same in different parts of Scotland. So we need to listen to the people involved in the industries and learn from them too. But I think there's a very important economic aspect to this. We need to break up the fishing oligarchy. We absolutely have to transform how we think about our fishing economy. We need to focus on marine protection, so to ban dredging and to stop making our stocks be depleted as quickly as they are. And we need to focus on Thanks, Jazz. We need to focus on the very specific issues of broader marine protection, not only for our fish stocks, but because we know the benefits to climate change that protection can have too.
Thanks very much indeed, Maggie. So that was our first candidate asking questions to other candidates. Let's move to our next questioner, and that is Patrick.
Okay, so I think the 2016 campaign did pretty well at saying what is the role that the Scottish Greens are going to play, bolder Holyrood, better Scotland. How do you think we're going to break open the 2021 election if it does become a contest between the SNP and the Tories about whether there should or shouldn't be another independence referendum? What's the space that we should be in that 2021 election?
Okay, what's the 2021 election space? And the candidate to answer that question first is Maggie, please.
Thanks very much. I think in some ways it depends on what's happened in the intervening months on Brexit and on independence. But I think for us, our policies are always holistic, and we need to use that election to be pushing our radical ideas for economic and social transformation. I think the Green New Deal, as Guy said earlier, it encompasses a whole range of different policies. But it's policies about transforming people's lives. It's about tackling inequality. It's about giving people high quality, good, well-paid jobs, and it's about ensuring that we tackle the biggest existential threat that we face, that of the climate crisis. So I think that within the Green New Deal, that there are several ideas that need to be front and center of our campaign, the big, positive, radical ideas that we know will create the kind of transformed economy and society that we want to see in our future Scotland.
Maggie, thanks very much indeed. Let's hear from Lorna on that question, please.
So I agree with Maggie that it's going to depend a bit on where we are with Brexit and independence and so on. But I think that what differentiates the Greens is our environmental message about the climate crisis, and that we genuinely believe it's a climate emergency. Between now and 2021, I expect there to be more hottest months ever, as this month has been. I expect to see more news, like my colleague in France, who's an ornithologist, who opened every single bird nesting box that she was monitoring this week, and every single great baby nestling was dead from the heat wave in France. As more and more of this data accumulates, public panic and the public realization that this is real is going to come to the fore. And if the SNP and the Tories are only interested in talking about constitutional matters, they will be left behind, because they are not the voices of the future. We are. So we're the people that have answers to these urgent climate crises. So this is what we have to focus on. This is the message we have to get out.
Thanks very much indeed, Lorna. Let's hear from Graham. 2021 election, what are your key themes?
Well, I think that, the Constitution may well be one of those themes, but I think that actually we need to be saying to people that we are the party of fairness. We are the party that, in a way, a lot of Labour Party members are disillusioned with their current party. A lot of SNP members are disillusioned with their current party, that we are a progressive party. We are a real voice for change, and we are a real voice that says the world needs to be different than how it's run now. And actually, whether there's an independent country or not, there's only 11 years left. We can't spend 4 of them just doing nothing. We need to be making positive changes right now to make sure that we are able to tackle the climate emergency. So I would be kind of saying that that is a position that we need to be taking, to say we are a positive party, and come all who have positive ideas and join us, because we're going to need to change this world.
Graham, thanks very much indeed. Let's go back up to Aberdeen for the next answer, and that's Guy, please.
Well, I've touched on this already. I think we can't out SNP the SNP, and we're certainly not going to follow the Tories' lead on this. I think we definitely need to have a Green New Deal as essential to our message, but I also think we need to look at abolition of council tax. So I think that needs to be centre stage. I know Patrick and the rest of the MSPs are in discussions about this now, but I think we really need to promote what our vision of empowered communities is. And second of all, it's not actually up to us per se to make these decisions. It's up to National Conference and National Council. One of the things that makes us so distinct is that we're a member-led party. And I think that's really important to get through. We will, of course, set the tone of leadership to the wider public, but we need to engage our members in selling our message as well. So Green New Deal, local democracy, abolishing council tax, things that have a real impact on communities and that actually are relatable to people. I mean, I want to protect the birds as much as everybody else, but a lot of people aren't going to necessarily see that day to day. So we need to make sure that whatever message we put out is something that people relate to and see every day, no matter what happens. And that is how we punch through.
Thanks very much indeed, Guy. I'm glad to hear we've got a Protect the Birds candidate. I'm sure the other candidates will all argue that they all are. But anyway, let's move on to our next question from one candidate to their fellow candidates. And this question comes from Lorna.
So my question to you all is, regardless of how this internal election turns out, what will you do over the next year to make the experience of Scottish Green Party members better?
Okay, and let's first of all go to Graham for an answer on that one.
I think no matter how this election goes, I think I'd be wanting to support our members to become more active. So that's about getting people who are nervous to get them along to the first meeting, to come along to a stall, to come along to canvassing, because we're going to need the skills to kind of fight elections. We've had quite a lot of elections in a row, so actually this is a chance to actually gain in skills, grow our party's talents, so that when we come up for the next election, we can do them. So I have some experience of environmental regulation. If there's anything in policy that I can chip into that, I will do that, because I don't want our party to kind of go without the kind of expertise that it needs. We have people from all different backgrounds in our party. We need to be taking that involved in, and that includes me. So if there's anything that I can help in, I'll chip that in as well.
Thanks very much indeed, Graham. Let's go up to Aberdeen and hear from Guy.
So no matter what happens in this election, I will fall back a little bit on what I'm doing already. So building up my own branch, and if I'm elected co-leader, building up other branches in a similar fashion. I've also been working with the Rainbow Greens to get them up and running, and I'm so pleased that I managed to hand over to John Hardy, although he's maybe not as pleased as I am, but I'm still working with him, especially on the trans rights issues, which I think is a really big thing that we need to focus on. But also working with the trade union movement. So I'm part of it's got a massive acronym, but the Scottish Green Trade Union Group. So I'll be working with them to make sure that the union movement knows that we value and care about their participation in our democracy. I also think, though, my style of leadership is a campaigning style of leadership. So I will be visiting branches in particular that are struggling. So I know a few off the top of my head that I really want to prioritise and see exactly what area of development they are. So I will do a branch audit no matter what happens, and work with the other members in the national committees to make sure that all our branches are fit for purpose.
Guy, thanks very much indeed. Let's stay in Aberdeen and hear from Maggie on how do you create a better experience for members?
Thanks, Chaz. And Lorna, thanks for this question. I think probably the most important thing that we can do for our members is to make whatever activities and engagement they have with the party fun. You know, politics should be fun. Our engagements, our campaigning activities, our events should be fun. They should be engaging and interesting. And that's what's so important. we also need to be clear about what members can actually do and the breadth of activities that they can get involved in. I think we sometimes try to just control and pigeonhole things a little bit, and we need to very, very clearly move away from that. That's very, very much a part of building a movement, and that's fundamental to what I believe is important as not only party leadership, but also part of our green politics. And that's building a movement with a range of interesting activities, with strong campaigning messages on issues people care about. So it's about a fun member experience, because if people are having fun, they'll want to do more of it, they'll want to be talking to more people and getting more people involved.
Yay for fun.
Very much indeed to our Aberdeen duo. We'll come back to Edinburgh and hear from Patrick on that question.
Does that mean I have to be the one saying we shouldn't have fun? Everybody here will be wanting whoever gets elected as co-leader to get out there around the country, engaging with our local branches, and yes, making sure that campaigning is fun. Election campaigns are fun, believe it or not. And one of the most important things that the party as a whole is going to have to do, not just our co-leaders, is recognise that we're now firing the starting gun for our 2021 election campaign. It begins now. In fact, in Glasgow, in my own area, we've already begun our campaigning, our targeted canvassing in the run to the 2021 election. We need to be inspiring that around the country. We can't pretend that the 2021 election campaign is going to begin a few months before polling day. It begins now, and our co-leaders are going to have a critically important role in bringing that campaigning energy out around the country, having fun, but making sure that people realise we're in campaign mode as of now.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. So we're going to hear from two more candidates putting a question to their fellow candidates, and the first of those two is Graham.
So my question is, with school children striking for climate and the kind of rise of Extinction Rebellion, how do we make environmental issues more than a niche concern for big businesses and others who seem to be unconcerned?
More than a niche concern. Patrick?
I think it already is. And I think the school strike movement and Extinction Rebellion, they're not some sort of flash in the pan. And I don't think that they're going to be short-lived. I think they are a reflection of the fact that throughout society, many, many more people than ever before are recognizing not just the reality of climate change, not just the urgency of climate change, and the fact that it's now being talked of in terms of emergency and crisis, but the fact that it requires of us a wholesale transformation, that our existing economic structure is not up to it, and that transformation needs to be one that works for people. I think most importantly, we should not be trying to take for granted the votes or the political support of the people who are building and being activists in those movements. We need to be as much listening and learning from those movements as hoping to gain their support. We should hope to gain their support, but we need to listen and learn from them and not take them for granted.
Thanks very much indeed, Patrick. So, Maggie, what's your take on this? The climate strikers and Extinction Rebellion. How can we forge better links?
I think they are crucial to the success of the movement that we are a part of too. I think Greta Thunberg, other climate strikers, Extinction Rebellion, they have done more to shift public debate on the climate emergency than political parties have, and I think we need to acknowledge that and to understand the value of the social movement. If we are to be successful as a movement, we need to be building and forging very, very strong links with them, because we know that the world will be a much better place when it is free from the shackles of corporate control and capitalist power, because that corporate control and capitalist power is there are the seeds of the destruction, not only of our communities, but of our planet as well. And the strikers and Extinction Rebellion are really leading the way on this. And I think we need to have not only very, very close links with them, but be in conversation, be in partnership with them, and use them to get our messages of Green New Deal, of just transition, and the other policies we've been talking about out to a wider audience.
Maggie, thanks very much. Let's stay in Aberdeen for the next answer and hear from Guy.
Well, I think already these issues are moving away from being niche. In Aberdeen, it's tough being a green in the oil capital of Europe. So I have had to do this day in, day out, making sure that people can relate to green policy. So for a prime example, in Aberdeenshire, it suffered drought-like conditions last year. That directly affects the incomes of farmers. When we're looking at Aberdeen, Aberdeen has had the River Dee break its banks. Now, I'm very Aberdeen focused because this is where I live, but these issues are happening across Scotland. We've seen more wildfires than ever before. That's an intolerable situation. So I think we always need to refer back to people. And I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does this really effectively. So I would like to emulate that sort of style of leadership. Follow the money as well. Where is the money going that, to these big polluters? There was a Guardian article not that long ago which showed that the biggest polluters are not individuals, but massive corporations. And I think we need to be making sure that that message is out there and it's really, really tackled.
Guy, thanks very much indeed. And our final candidate to answer that question is Lorna.
Thank you. I'm going to name drop Christiana Figueres again because it was she who essentially made the Paris Climate Agreement happen after the disaster of the Copenhagen Agreement. And I listened to her speak about her process for doing this, and I think it's something we can emulate. She has 3 levels of leadership that she imagines. One is leadership of self, leadership of others, but the final one, and that's what made the Paris Agreement happen, was leadership in context. And the question was about making climate issues mainstream. How do you get business concerned about it? And that's what Christiana Figueres did in order to make the Paris Agreement happen. She went around the world and she talked to business interests and asked them, what are they concerned about? So that when she presents climate issues to them, she's speaking their language. It's a risk to your bottom line. It's a risk to your assets. It's a risk to your customers. And when you speak to business in language they understand, they can hear you. She went around the world and spoke to religious groups and said, what are you concerned about with climate issues? And religious groups are concerned about the human costs of climate issues. So by listening to these groups and finding out what language they speak, that's how we communicate our messages to them.
Lorna, thanks very much indeed. Which brings us on to our last question from one candidate to the other 4, and that comes from Maggie.
Thanks, Chaz. Green politics is about decentralization, and we talk a lot about decentralizing power from Holyrood to local authorities, to our councils. But I think it's really important that we empower communities and give them more control of their own lives. The Consular Commission on Strengthening Local Democracy that I sat on had a series of proposals on exactly this. So I'm asking, what powers would you devolve below local authorities, and what processes would you use to do this?
Wow. Okay. So I'm a local councillor, so I'm very much in favour of local questions, and we're going to stay in Aberdeen. Sorry, our technical assistants. We're going to stay in Aberdeen and ask Guy to answer that question.
Well, first of all, I think local government needs to actually be local government. At the moment, a lot of councillors feel that they're essentially a board of trustees of a company. And, it's the civil servants and the directors of various services that are making the decisions. That is unacceptable. The first thing, actually, I would say is councillors work really hard and they deserve to be paid a full-time wage for full-time work. The vast majority of them are working full-time. I would also devolve powers lower than that. So looking at citizen assemblies within local communities to replace community councils. So the chair of those assemblies would be elected, but any person could turn up. Those meetings are well publicized and vote on the issues that are really important to them. So it's not always the same people turning up to talk about issues that they're not actually that concerned about. So you always have people coming there and actually speaking about it. But also devolving money. I think that's really, really important. I think local community councils, one of the reasons why so many people aren't involved is because where there's money, there's power, and community councils don't have resources. That really needs to change so that they can actually do the things they want to do in communities. One community council in Aberdeen I know is rolling out language classes for new people, new Scots to Aberdeen. So I think that's the kind of thing we really need to be looking at.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Guy. And let's hear from Patrick on empowering local communities.
Yeah, I think the idea of decentralising below local council level, first of all, we should be asking what should be a local council level. We have very large regional bodies in Scotland. We don't really have what a lot of European countries would recognise as local government. So I think we should be reinventing that genuine level of local government. Whether you call it councils or you give it a different name isn't relevant, but local communities should be able to make decisions for themselves. But yeah, even below that more local council structure, I think one of the most important ways to push power down is to push ownership down the communities, whether that's the local bus company, whether it's land, whether it's energy systems, and there's so much potential in Scotland for local community ownership of renewable energy. That gives local communities genuine power, genuine ability to wield some influence and make some decisions. So decentralising ownership in our economy is as important as decentralising the democratic structures.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Let's hear from Lorna on better empowering local communities.
Thank you. So I'm very much a student of Andy Whiteman on this, but which agrees with largely what Patrick has just said. So rather than just repeat what Patrick has just said, I'll take a slightly different angle. I think that the two issues which move me about local government is one is the council tax reform or lack thereof. The Scottish government, the SNP, stood on a policy or a manifesto of council tax reform and have utterly failed to achieve it. So as co-leader, I would do what I could to help the parliamentary team with their budget negotiations to really press the SNP on this matter and try and encourage proper reform of council tax. The other thing I think is we need to watch our backs on this as well. Our views on councils are not obvious. And I look in horror at what's happened in England, where schooling has been taken away from councils and handed to academies who are unaccountable to anyone. That's a terrifying thing. A parent of a student is having a problem at the school, perhaps your student has special needs, and there's no one you can go to, no one you can say there's a problem because they're run by businesses who are not accountable to anyone. So we have to watch our backs and defend the value of local councils, even as they are, and not let creeping Tory policies erode what they already have.
Okay, Lorna, thanks very much indeed. And finally, let's hear from Graham.
Yeah, I think I'm from North Lanarkshire. There are at least 10 town centres in there, and to say that North Lanarkshire can make a decision which will be good for all of North Lanarkshire is one of the most crazy things about the way that our local authorities are currently set up. We want to have different towns being able to prioritise their budgets and their own ways of looking at it. What do they want from transport? So, I mean, I guess I'm quite fortunate in that way, but there's terrible transport between all the different towns in North Lanarkshire, even though they are supposed to be all one local authority. I think that one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm in different town centres is just the rivalry between towns. People have an enormous civic pride about where they're from, and that is not reflected in our democracy locally. Basically, you're all just bunched together. North Lanarkshire was pushed together because of Monklandsgate. It's not really a kind of coherent group, and it should be based on what people actually think is important to them, and the money needs to follow that.
Great, thanks very much indeed. You finished speaking just as the Time's Up sign appeared. And that brings us to the end of our questions for tonight's hustings. In a moment, we're going to hear the closing statements from candidates, and I'm going to invite them to speak for 1 minute each on that. We're going to take them in reverse order to the opening statements. Before we do that, can I just remind you, please do, if you didn't hear your question asked tonight, please do continue the conversation on social media using hashtag SGPLeader2019, or do get in touch with the candidates direct if you've got any specific questions for each of those. But let's hear the candidates' 1 minute closing statements, and let's start with Graham.
Thanks. I want to ensure that the Greens across Scotland are prepared for whatever comes over the next few years. We've gone through the long and arduous process of changing our structures so that we can better face the challenges that we have as a party and ensure that communication works better and we can respond to the changing political issues. It was well worth it, although it did take a lot of energy. But the upcoming months and years promise to be very challenging. I don't think anyone can safely predict what we're going to get in terms of Brexit or IndyNet or what election's actually going to come next. But we need to ensure that we keep our ears to the ground for the voices of the people of Scotland who are looking for a political home that isn't a one-trick pony or just saying no to what someone else says. We already have those parties and people are getting disillusioned with them. The Greens stand for fairness and say the hard things sometimes while other parties spin a line. So I want to work with all members to make sure we're the party that Scotland needs us to be, and that's why I'm asking for your first preference vote.
Graham, thanks very much indeed. Lorna, let's have your final statement, please.
In January of this year, I was on a ship in the Antarctic. We sailed past bare rock where there should have been snow, past water where there should have been ice. I've seen for myself, and I'm sure you've all seen too, climate change is real and it's happening now. We have 11 short years to fundamentally change our economy and way of life. This juggernaut will take a while to turn, and the next few years are crucial. We need to make the climate crisis real, and we need to communicate these urgent messages out there. I am the co-leader who gets things done. Once I'm on a mission, I'm a bit unstoppable. So please give me your first one.
Lorna, thanks very much indeed. Let's stay in Edinburgh and hear from Patrick.
Thanks very much for listening tonight. You've heard some strong themes from all five of us, I think. Climate emergency, how to respond to that, how to make it real for people. Green New Deal, how to turn that climate emergency into a hopeful, optimistic vision of a better economy. And the need to re-energise and revitalise our party, especially at local level, and ensuring that the diversity of our party shines through. What makes me unique of the five is the ability to bring the high profile that my parliamentary role gives me, as well as the political experience that I've built up there, making sure that our parliamentary team is part of our leadership team as a party as we approach the 2021 election. That link is going to be crucial. So I hope you'll give me your first preference vote.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Let's go up to Aberdeen and hear from Guy.
So if you elect me as your co-leader, I will provide proactive branch support. I won't wait to be asked. I will make sure that you know that I am there, and I will phone you, not email you. I will phone you to make sure that you know that I'm just at the other end of the phone. I also want to lock in our vote. I want to make sure that we have enough money so that people are able to vote for us no matter where they live. One of the big things that irritates me is the fact that sometimes people vote for us in one election, they can vote for us, and other times they can't. That allows drift, and that is eating into our core support. That needs to change, and I will work with the fundraising committee to make sure that that happens. I also want to sell our message. We've already spoken about what that message should be, and I think I'm really well placed to do that. I have a unique experience. I worked in the fossil fuel industry. If there's anyone that can convince people to get out of that industry, it would be me. And I also believe that actually we've seen plenty of examples where you don't have to be an MSP to be a leader. And I think that's really important. And the second thing is breaking down barriers. Electing a strong working class co-leader would send a massive message to the people of Scotland that we are the party for everybody and the green party politics is for everyone. So give me your first preference and I won't let you down.
Guy, thanks very much. And our final candidate closing statement comes from Maggie.
Thanks very much, Chaz. I've said many times before that the job of the radical is to make hope possible. And that is what I want to do with the position of co-leader of the Scottish Greens. I want to give people hope and use that hope to change Scottish politics for the better. And I've done it before. I did it with the living wage and participatory budgeting when a councillor in Edinburgh, and with our 2014 European campaign focusing on the positive case for immigration in Scotland. Those events changed Scottish politics. That is the kind of hopeful and radical leadership that we desperately need as we face the greatest existential threat we have ever faced, the 11 years we've got to tackle the climate breakdown. So we need positive, radical messages of hope to enthuse our members, to galvanise support in our supporter base, and to reach new audiences, to turn the goodwill that is out there for us into votes. So electing me as one of the first ever co-leaders of the Scottish Greens can do just that. Please give me your first preference. Thank you very much.
Maggie, thanks very much indeed. And that closing statement from Maggie brings us to the close of our hustings this evening. Can I first of all thank all of the candidates, 3 here in Edinburgh and 2 up in Aberdeen, for their persistence and most importantly, from my perspective, for sticking very well to time. Can I thank everybody who's submitted questions, both online, on social media and through emails. I'm sorry we weren't able to ask all of the questions this evening, but please do continue the debate online using hashtag SGPLeader2019. Just a reminder that your ballot for this election and for the other 54 posts, many of which are contested, should hit your email inbox later on this week. Look out for an email from Electoral Reform Services, and the instructions and the link to vote will all be in there. Polls will be open for at least 21 days, but probably not much longer. So if you're planning a holiday, please look out for that email. That's it from me. Thank you very much indeed, in particular to our tech team here in Edinburgh, who've done a fantastic job. But please do continue the debate online, SGP Leader 2019. And when your ballot paper arrives, don't forget to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's the ping music?